Who's that for me?
Hello, everyone. Timmy, I think we're here.
Hey, we're good. Welcome to Community Conversations, and thank you for sharing the traditional lunch hour with us again today. Today's topic, as you can see on the screen, is Get Out the Vote, Chester County. And later in the presentation, we're going to share two short videos that you see there also that really highlight the significance of getting out the vote, and it encourages all of us to make sure we take part in this this process for selecting our elected officials. We have three thought leaders today, and we have intentionally selected people of multiple generations because we want to get as many views as possible regarding the voting process and the challenges with the voting process. And you're going to hear some things today from our thought leaders about the voting process as they share their slides and share their own personal opinions. So the thought leaders we have today are Debbie Bookman, who is our Chester County Prothonotary. We have Cristian Luna, our Chester County Deputy Prothonotary. And in that same office, we have Angel Williams, and she's also Community Liaison and does a great job of connecting people with the right people they need to know. We, of course, want to make sure we give thanks to our promotional partners. As you see from this list here, there's a cross-section of chambers, businesses, nonprofits. And I also want to bring your attention to the right in the center there, Chester County 250, the America 250 PA Chester County. You're going to hear more about that as time goes on, but this is our logo that we use to help identify our 250th anniversary. And again, we're going to hear more about that going on, but just keep that logo in mind when you see it. That's what we're talking about. As far as the ground rules, they're all important and they're conducive to a meaningful conversation. I want to highlight a couple of them, though. One about muting yourself. First, I'd ask that if you're not speaking, please mute yourself because you may not recognize it, but there's typically some background noise and that will interfere with the presentation. Then also when we do the video streaming, I ask again that you make sure you're muted so that doesn't interfere with our bandwidth. And then the final one, it's really important for us to share some discussion today. Our thought leaders are going to drive that, and we're going to ask at the appropriate time that you all share your thoughts too, whether you do it verbally, whether you do it in the chat, but share your thoughts. We want to be able to respond to your questions and have some good conversations today, because we're going to talk about an all-important thing called voting, and in some cases, the lack of voting that's a challenge for us. So we want to know your thoughts. What do you think? How can we encourage? And when I say we, all of us, how can we encourage voting on our personal side, on the professional side? How can we encourage voting? Having said that, the next slide, you'll see in the top of the corner of each slide, our thought leaders. That will be the primary thought leader, but that doesn't preclude the other two folks who may share in comments. So with that, I will turn it over to Debbie Bookman.
Thank you so much, Timmy, and thank you to everyone that has joined us today. Very exciting and important topic, voting. This particular slide really stands out and resonates with me. So I want to give you all, if you haven't had an opportunity to look at the slide and review the statements, questionnaires, to do a little bit of homework. Take a look at it and see how two exactly the same scenarios, but two different individuals. So you have an African-American family in the Deep South on one side, which is family A, and then family B, you have a Northern European family in New England. Same scenarios, but as I went through each of the questions and statements, I noticed that there was a drastic difference. On one side, I received many no's. This was not allowable or permissible for the African-American family in the Deep South. And on the other side, same scenario, but was permissible and encouraged for the Northern European family. So from those questionnaires, you can see how difficult it was for one side to move up from generation to generation, almost impossible. Whereas on the other side, it was possible that provisions were made to further the generational impact on that family. Some of the main rights that allowed or stopped each family from being able to improve from one generation to the next was one thing that stood out to me, the ability to get a bank loan. It's still hard today. And this is 2024 for Blacks and Browns. So we've come far, but we haven't come far enough. And there's still a lot of work to be done. Next slide, please. So when did Americans get the right to vote? And you see the dates. I'm not going to read through everything, but in 1788, the U.S. Constitution is ratified. Most cases, white men over age of 21 could own property and vote. And if you notice that it specifically said white men. So at that time, women weren't even allowed to vote, Black or white. In 1792 to 1856, all white men over the age of 21 could vote. In 1870, the 15th Amendment of the Constitution ratified prohibits states denying the right to vote on the account of race, color, prior enslavement, but Black men over the age of 21 can vote, which is interesting because how many Black men, whether they were over the age of 21 or not, that weren't prior enslaved? Right? So you begin to see those barriers. So they give the illusion as if they're giving those permissions and we're trying to move forward, but they put a lot of barriers up to make it difficult to move forward and allowing Black people to vote. And then, of course, Jim Crow, 1877 to 1968. And that really, when they put in the literacy test and the poll taxes, I mean, Black people weren't even allowed to earn a decent wage. Now you're imposing these barriers where they had to be able to read, where you didn't allow them in schools. You didn't allow them to use the books in the white libraries. We couldn't share books, but yet they're saying you can vote, but these are the things you have to do. So the design was interesting. And unfortunately, some of those institutions are still in place today. Next slide, please. Okay, and we just continue on, but this one kind of looks at women's rights to vote. And 1890, Wyoming was the first state to grant women the right to vote. In 1920, the 19th Amendment of the United States is ratified. This amendment grants women the right to vote. And it is something that is celebrated, and women should be proud of that moment. But for me, as a Black woman, it would still be a sad time because we still weren't allowed to vote, although we were a major part of that movement for that ratification. But due to the Jim Crow laws, as it states there, we still couldn't vote. So we still had to keep fighting. 1924, the Indian Citizenship Act is passed. So Native Americans born in the US could vote. However, voting rights were still determined by the states, and Native Americans still faced issues. When I look at all of these slides and I think about what's happening today, and when I hear from people saying that, my vote doesn't count, if your vote didn't count, they would not go through such vast measures to prevent you from voting. So I really think that people need to stop and just, my mantra is make it make sense. Your vote holds a lot of power. And it's just important that we continue having these kinds of conversations. So I'm so grateful to the foundation for having this and opening this space for us to discuss. Next slide, please. Turn it over to Angel.
So in 1961, the 23rd Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was ratified. Residents of Washington, D.C. can participate in elections Prior to that, they weren't respected because they're not necessarily a state. So they actually had to fight for that. In 1962, Native Americans earned voting rights state by state. Utah is the last state to guarantee voting rights for this group. As we saw previously, they had to fight for that as well. In 1964, the 24th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is ratified. This bans the use of poll taxes in federal elections, which leads to 1965. The Voting Rights Act is passed. This finally reinforces the 15th Amendment, outlawing discriminatory voting practices, such as the poll tax, such as Jim Crow laws, and finally, Black women get the vote. So that's a big deal right there. And that also leads to, which isn't, I mean, it's not connected to voting, but it leads to the Fair Lending Act, where previously we weren't given an option to get home loans. There was a lot of discrimination in that, but because of the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act was passed as well. In 1971, the 26th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution is ratified. This amendment passed in the wake of the Vietnam War, because as we all know, you can be drafted at 18 and you can die at 18, but you couldn't vote. So finally, that was something that was passed relatively quickly because it just made sense. So now instead of 21, you can vote at the age of 18. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's really interesting. If you go back to the others, yeah. So it's really interesting how we're always being told that we're taking these measures to try and eliminate or reduce those barriers. But just in 2016, I believe it was, when they were requiring individuals to now have a driver's license. Well, my mother, for one, she never drove, never had a driver's license. But so they really put up these barriers, again, to prevent people from being able to vote. I know of people that told me they went to the polls and after voting every year, their name was suddenly dropped from the rolls. Again, just reinforcing the power that our votes have and the fear that we exude as Blacks and Browns. When we show up, we win. And it's not about which side, which party. It's about me being able to exercise that right to get fair and equitable treatment for all. You have anything to share on that?
I agree with you. There's a lot of power when it comes to voting.
There is.
That's why it's always on the top.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Did you have anything else?
We can go to the next
Okay,
one.
well, okay, and this is Cristian.
This is my slide. So this is a graphic to see why the youth is not voting. So I'm 26 years old. The first time I could vote was the 2016 election, which was a big year. And I knew that I had to show up and vote. And I was doing it not just for me, but for those who couldn't. And so to see the reasons why people were saying they were not able to show up and vote, it's kind of upsetting. And it shows that we take it for granted. And currently being a candidate myself, seeing that being the top issue that is a problem we see across the country, is there's not a diverse group of candidates. There's only a typical candidate you see. So when I knock somebody's door or I talk to them and they look at me and they're shocked that I'm even a candidate and I'm running for something. And I tell them I'm doing it because this is my future. This is my home, and I want to make a difference, and I want to make a difference for my family and my community. So I don't know if anyone else saw any reason why the youth didn't show up to vote. And I think a lot of it is targeting. For the longest time, we took the youth vote for granted, and now we started not to, because we realized when the youth shows up to vote, they win elections. And we saw that in 2020.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So barriers to voting. What I got out of this is that each one is either connected to money, lack of knowledge, lack of access to information, and your health. So when we talk about needing to arrange work or school schedule, the reality is, even when it comes down to the candidates, in order to run, and we talk about this all the time, you have to have money. And he works a 9 to 5. So And then we have people that work 12-hour shifts or people that work 2 jobs. So it's hard if you have to take off work to vote. They don't take it seriously, where in other countries, every election is a holiday. Not knowing where to vote, the lack of information. Typically, I noticed that I didn't know this, but my great-grandmother died at 89. She never voted. So if it's not something you talk about at home because it doesn't affect you, how are you going to find out where to vote? You have to have the want to, hey, if I vote, my vote matters, I can make a difference. But if you grow up in a family where, you've been told, they don't care about us, we're not represented fairly, so you're not going to vote. Needing help with questions about their candidates, ballots, and polls. Again, that comes down to money. If you're watching TV, the people that have the commercials have the most money. And a lot of times it's a mudslinging event. So they're saying things that are horrible about each other instead of telling you how they can improve your life. So the next one, needing help discerning truth from the fake news. That just,
No, yeah, go ahead.
you want to say something?
No, I'm just agreeing with everything you're saying, but I'm also, what it's doing is I'm having like flashbacks to that first slide. What's happening today is just a modification of what has happened in the past and continues to happen. And it's really unfortunate because you have families where, to Angel's point, it's not talked about. In my family, we didn't talk about politics. I didn't really, I registered at 18, I was proud, and I really didn't understand the levels other than what I had to learn, the branches of government that I learned in school. But I didn't understand how it impacted me because my parents being immigrants, I guess they felt it doesn't really impact. The first time that my mother voted was in 2020 for the president. And that was an emotional, and she was really proud of herself. But she had been in this country since 1965 and had never voted. And she is a citizen, but I look at all of the barriers that they create. Today, Blacks and Browns, and I'm not saying that whites don't have this, but it's the difference, where you have Blacks and Browns that have to work 2 and 3 jobs to be able to afford just the basic necessities. Well, between those 2 and 3 jobs, the polls open from 7 to 8, okay, but they have to put their kids on the bus. They have to make sure they get to their job. And so being able to vote is a really difficult thing. We're lucky that we've been able to get the mail-in ballots, but then again, they do little things to kind of make people not understand even how to seal and sign the ballot. So having these spaces and having these opportunities, but more than anything, impacting and empowering our younger generation. I'm so humbled to have someone that I kind of pulled under my wing that is now, against all odds, is going out there and he's facing a very difficult incumbent, but he's doing it. He's knocking doors and he's out there and people are seeing him and they're hearing him. And that, I feel, is a responsibility that we as voters, we have to take up and do. We have to train that next generation. I'm not going to be here forever. I'm going to be 52 on Monday and I'm old and I can't do these things all the time. But I think it's important that we empower and educate and encourage and support the next generation. I think Angel mentioned that it's a money game when it comes to politics, and whoever has the most money, they propel. Well, I don't know how many on here may work for the county, but is not paying. But that's where it takes a village. It takes a village. I think we can move to the next slide or I'll talk all day. So, yeah, there you go. You're on mute, Timmy.
All right.
I don't know if
I'm
you want to
gonna
talk
share
about the
these
videos.
videos.
Yeah, we're going to show a couple of very short videos, but they really emphasize the essence of voting, why voting is important, and you'll see some things happening. And they're a couple years old, but these things are still very true today. So take a look at the videos, and then we're going to talk about them afterwards.
Can you guys see the videos?
Yes.
Okay.
attention to what the people who claim to represent you are doing in your name.
The government cannot do it alone. It takes all of us.
They represent you, and if they've not done right by you, then you have a responsibility to send them packing.
The only way to address a crisis is to bring the power of the people together.
Still we rise.
Progress is on the move.
When they go low, we go to the polls.
Keep your head up, carry on.
I am here to tell you today that your feelings.
That is the first one. And here's the second one.
I'm Christopher Escalante from AFMAO, and I'm going to vote.
Hi, I'm Goldie from Goldilocks and the Bear. We're voting in November, and so should you.
What is going on? I am Smitty2447, and this election year, no matter what you believe in, how you plan on voting, just make sure you go out and get your voice heard and vote, okay? Do it for America.
Hey y'all, Space Captain Zemo here, and I'm voting for a brighter tomorrow. Your voice matters, your vote matters, so make sure this November that you vote.
Hey everyone, I'm Mac and Cheese Please, and this November I'll be voting because my voice matters.
Hey, I'm the famous. I'm voting this November. I hope you do too.
Of all the years to set out an election, this year is not it. This election isn't just about what candidate will be in the White House or what party will control the House or Senate. This election is about Black lives and trans rights. This election is about whether or not someone can get snatched into a van for protesting something that they feel is unjust. This election is about doing what's right. This November the 3rd, I will be voting, and I solemnly hope that you will too.
My name is Kimberly, otherwise known as Sploops, and I urge you to vote this November 3rd. Make a difference. Let your voice be heard.
Hey everybody, Mitsan here, and I just want to remind you to go vote. What are you doing? Go vote, like right now, because I'm about to do it right now too. Voting's really important. It's your right as an American citizen to go vote. So what are you doing? Go vote.
So what do you think? Deb, Christian, Angel, what do you think of those videos?
I think they're telling the truth. You have to show up, you have to vote, take a friend, give a ride, cover your friend's shift if you need to, make sure people get out and vote.
I'm not covering.
Or now here in Chester County have the mail-in ballot. Just inform people on how to request one, when to, how to fill it out properly, where the drop-off locations are, just help people be informed. When we're better informed, we make a better decision.
I think that, during the setting in which these videos were made, that, there was a very intentional effort to get that information out to everybody. And I know that, these positions, they're difficult positions. Running for elected office, especially when you get up in the legislation, state, federal, presidential. It's not easy being in those seats. And I get, people are going to be disappointed with certain decisions that are made. However, I think that sometimes we forget about the past. Like, we have short memories, and we know how bad it can be, how bad it was. So we need to make sure that we don't revert back to that time, and that we continue moving forward, which, again, if you're not happy with what's happening, then it's important that we begin to plant new seeds, to train, to educate, to support, and vet and grow new leadership. These positions were not designed for you to sit forever. So it's important to be able to move on and, pass the baton to a new outlook, a new perspective. And I just really hope that we continue, again, opening spaces like this where you can hear from the younger generation. Again, they don't feel that they are relevant. So we have to encourage them and let them know you are relevant. And it's time for them to take their place and just continue having this conversation and doing your part. And don't think that your part, every little bit, the micros become macros. So that's what we have to do. You start, and if everybody starts moving together, then we've created a movement and not a moment. It can't just be this election and not, it has to be a continual movement.
Yeah, I think the youth is doing better. I think it's just that the negative kind of overrides the work that's being done. I think when it comes to social media, that's where the younger generation really takes a hold and takes account to find out the facts and put it out on a platform. The only downside is we're in a society now that's like it's hot for 1 second and then it's out of your mind the next. So we just have to remain consistent and not give up so easily, because when you see the negative getting all the attention, you kind of say, you know what, we give up hope. But then, like to your point, if we go back 50 years ago where we didn't have the rights, it's like we're slowly reverting back to that if we look at how we're losing our rights today. So it's very important to stay consistent and just remind them, like, if you think this is bad, imagine what can happen if you don't exercise your right. You may not have that right in 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Deb, Cristian,
You got anything?
if I could share a comment real quick with you, and I'm going to share something personal from my life when I was growing up. I'm from a small town in Michigan. And as when I was growing up, I want to say I was around 20 or so. I used to get my haircut at a place called White's Barbershop, Mr. White's Barbershop. And Mr. White at that time, and again, I was in my 20s, Mr. White was well into his 80s at that point in time. And Mr. White had a history of being a stalwart in the civil rights movement. He was on the front lines of the civil rights movement and would share those stories with us from time to time. But in his barbershop, he had this white, nondescript, handwritten sign that said very simply, if you don't vote, don't talk politics. And I can tell you of times when I was in the barbershop and someone would make a comment about the political environment. Mr. White would, in his very simplistic way, he would stop the conversation and he would ask 2 questions. Are you registered to vote? If that was affirmative, the next question was, did you vote in the last election? And Mr. White was adamant that if you don't take the time to voice your opinion and vote to make decisions about who is going to be in political office, then you have no right in my barbershop to talk about politics. So he wasn't discouraging the conversation, but he was saying, hold yourself accountable. If you're going to talk about the concern, be a part of the solution. So I just wanted to share that with you guys.
No, that's perfect and absolutely true. In 2016, a lot of people had a lot of comments to make, but ask that question, did you vote? Well, no, because then I don't want to hear it. This isn't the time to complain. You got to complain at that voting box. But to your point, Timmy, you didn't take the time. You didn't think that it was that important. But now that the decision has now been removed from your hand, you have that power in your hand. And you threw it away on election day when you didn't go to the polls. So now, it was a very frustrating time. And ever since then, it's empowered me even more so to make sure that that's my responsibility to make sure that I get out there, but it's also, again, my responsibility to encourage the younger generation. We always talk about that, the children are the future, but what am I doing as an adult to make sure that I'm securing and protecting that future for them? And I mean from everything from school to jobs to the environment. There's so much that goes into that one ballot sheet. And it's not a joke. I have grandchildren and I want to be able to leave the world a little bit better than I found it. But at this point, I just want to leave a world for them. It's getting that bad. You got anything?
Unknown caller.
Okay. There you go, Christian.
So for voting access, I think luckily in Chester County, we're a little bit more fortunate now that the polls are accessible to everybody. I think part of it we should blame the campaigns because they do direct targeting on different voters, and a lot of the times it's the Black and browns that are left out of those conversations. I know my door has never been knocked other than one time in 2016, and I voted every time since. And no one's ever asked me what my thought was. And I get a couple mailers now that I am registered as a super voter, but it's a part of the campaign and the candidate to make sure that they reach all voters in every part of your district or your community where you're running. And I think that also just engages people to want to show up and vote. When you ask them and you put that power in their hands and say, what do you want to see? If I were to win, what would you want to see? What do we need to do different? What's been working? What hasn't been working? You can't represent the people without talking to the people. And you see it across the country every election year, especially during a presidential when people have to wait hours and hours for voting. Or they're in some states now barring the fact that you can even give somebody a water, you're going to get arrested. Give them a piece of pizza, you're going to get arrested. And a lot of the minority communities are the ones being targeted by these legislations and making it harder to access your polling location. And it happened in the past at Lincoln University, where they finally moved voting on campus in an accessible spot where you can go in and vote. So this is it's a structural and a systematic issue that we see. And, these voters are just not being informed the way they should be.
I appreciate that you brought up about the candidates because so there's responsibility on both sides. We have to make sure that, while I'm an elected official, I'm also a voter. And I want to make sure that the voters, the people that put me in office, they don't just see me during that election period. 3 years, 4 years goes by, and now they see me again. I need them to see that everything that I said while I was running, I'm doing it, keeping them informed. You have to, you need your voters to believe you. You need them to hear your heart almost. And that's really critical. It can't be, and obviously if you're running at the state level, it's impossible for you to be everywhere. But you do those touches over that time frame that you have in office to let them know, listen, I may not be able to get to you personally, but I heard you and this is what I'm doing. So the candidates also have responsibilities to the voters. So, I think together we can make a difference, but it takes everyone and everything. And then, so perfect slide, call to action. Black women in Chester County, Black women of Chester County in action. Cheryl Miles is the founder of this organization, and one of their arms is Our Voices Should Be Heard. And this is a very intentional effort that the members of this organization has done to specifically reach the Black and Browns, the BIPOC organizations, faith communities, sororities, fraternities, businesses, allies, to take the challenge to get out there and commit to getting people to the polls, getting them educated. A lot of times, my position particularly, when I went to run for Prothonotary, there were people that looked at me and said, wait, do I vote for that? Is that a position? But they vote for it every year, every 4 years. And it was just interesting to me. So, my responsibility, I've been out there getting across the county, trying to educate people on what the Prothonotary is and what I do. And so for 2023, they were like, oh, I know, I saw you here. It's important that candidates do that, elected officials do that. So this organization, I've done work with them. They're amazing. And it is nonpartisan. We speak on the issues And I think once you speak on the issues at hand, it makes it a lot more understandable and easier for people to say, you know what, I'm going to register for whichever party and I'm going to go and vote for the equity and just being fair. There are websites listed on this sheet. Really important that you take a look, see what's happening, and everybody has a role to play, no matter how, I would say there is no big or small role. Making a call, writing a postcard, talking to your neighbor. I know in this climate, it could be a little bit scary to talk about voting. But if you share with your inner circle and then they're in this, we can do it without having that fear of any kind of repercussions, especially in this climate.
Hey, Deb and your team, could you talk a little bit about, I mean, we talk about getting out the vote and doing voter registration drives. How effective do you think it is as far as putting up tables and get out the vote tables at various community festivals and community events? I mean, do you find that people really do go up and take advantage of those? Because there's a part of me that wants to encourage every single nonprofit that has a community event this summer and fall to do get out the vote tables, every single place of worship to have a get out the vote table in front. But how do people really use those? And Kristen, do you find, and I mean, do you find that younger people actually go up and talk to folks behind those tables, or is that a barrier as well? Because I've gone door to door and knocking on people's doors to help get out the vote, and nobody answers. I don't know what they look at when they see me in whatever neighborhoods, but I don't find the door to door knocking. That's really depressing. It's just to leave a flyer. But do people actually come up and talk to you when you're at the table?
I think it's always worth the effort. It's always about meeting the voter where you're at. So during some days I've knocked 100 doors and only talked to 5 people, but those 5 people moved me to continue to do the next 100. And it's about leaving a message and saying, here's my contact info, we can talk later. It's always worth it to just have that conversation and say, hey, are you registered to vote? Are you okay? Cool. There's an election coming. Just get informed. And keeping it at that. Some people do like to do a deep dive in 5 seconds about politics and everything, but the biggest message is just letting people to know that they have the power to vote and they have the right to do it. And it's a right that's under attack. So we have to exercise that and use it.
I also love going door to door. I've done phone banking, and you get way less people than door to door. The door to door interactions are usually way more.
One, and it was not good.
I'm with you. I did not remember that.
I love the door to door. That was like one of the best parts of my campaign when I ran.
Hello.
But yeah, a lot of people aren't home and things like that. But to Christian's point, 100 doors, 5 people, you have left literature, but that's 5 more people than you had before. And it's about building that consensus. And I feel that to what you were saying, Karen, I think that there are some venues where people are a little intimidated to talk, to register to vote. But I think if you have them in the libraries, if you have them at various nonprofits, and not just at the large events, but even smaller events, just setting up a table, on Lincoln Highway in Coatesville, that's a great way. I mean, you give incentives, have bottles of water or fresh cup of fruit or something, that'll kind of draw them in.
I'm with her as far as having, I've said that multiple times, like when we have events, we need to have a table to have people, because I think it's about giving them the information, because honestly, they don't know how important and how impactful they can be if they do vote. So if you have someone there that has the personality to entice them to want to know more, then they're definitely going to want to register if they're not registered yet, especially in his district where we have a big population of Hispanic people that may have not been, because if you think we work long hours, they work longer hours. There's no question about that. So the last thing they're thinking about is voting because they're trying to earn a living. So, but if we express to them like, hey, your vote matters, somebody like me will represent you And in Harrisburg, that makes all the difference of them making sure either they mail in their vote or they show up at the polls.
Mary Kay had her hand up and then it went down. Then I just wanted to give her an opportunity if she wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on door-to-door canvassing, I think it's critically important to do, particularly in underrepresented communities. I've had the opportunity to do it in Oxford the last couple of election rounds, and it was very satisfying, and people were extremely appreciative of somebody knocking on their door. And what I found was, when you got a door, you tended to get the entire family, including younger kids there that could hear the message about voting. So I always walk out to go door to door with a pit in my stomach and, do it with somebody else. So I'm guilted into keeping going. But once you get a couple of good doors, it really motivates you. So I would do it. The one thing I did notice was some of the materials folks got was misleading. There was particularly stuff that looks like a report card that folks might have thought was official. So I think it would be really helpful to figure out a nonpartisan, and Cheryl, maybe you're doing this, way to have just like the information about voting that people might not know where to go to ask, that, there is an election every year in Pennsylvania, twice a year. Sometimes, or all the time. We always have the primary and the general, and just making sure, understand, it's a habit and they have to do it every year.
All right, Mary Kay, when you go out, I should go with you because people like to open doors to you, and now I can be reconvinced to go out and knock on doors.
I'd love
I
it.
live in Kennett Square, and you have an office down there still, don't you?
Yes, we'll plan on it. Let's do that.
Good. All right, make a plan. That's good. Thank you.
Hey, Debbie, Jesse's got some great comments in the chat too regarding voting and what have you. You might want to call on Jesse if he wants to come online.
Yeah, Jesse.
Okay, I'm coming. Hi.
There you go.
Oh, the great Jesse Cox is here.
Aw, Debbie, you cracked me up when you said you're old. Girl, I'll be 74 in 10 days. I'm talking old.
God bless you.
So anyway, I used to be a monster going door to door, but my knees and hips are like, girl, you got to find another way now, which drives me crazy.
I'm almost there with you.
But anyway, I just really can't impart enough how important taking a deep breath, putting up with whatever you get going door to door or tabling. I mean, I've been doing social change work since 1968, and I've had my life threatened because of some of the things I was doing, and big deal. But anyway, it's not about me. It's about having faith in what you're doing and to really see it as we're planting seeds for the future. And so you might not get a good response going door to door. And I mean, I don't wear any lesbian outfits when I'm going door to door, or, I don't identify myself in all my other ways.
You always wear a lesbian outfit, Jesse.
Well, I often do, but well, actually, today I have on Rainbow Corral, Delaware, but
oh, I get
it. But anyway, you got to pick your T-shirt for certain jobs. But it's just so important to not lose energy or belief in all of the processes, because some people relate more to someone taking the time to come to the door. I've been called names. I mean, you don't even want to hear the stuff I've heard. And I'm like, I keep smiling and say, well, thank you for your time. Here's some information if you want it. And as Mary Kay was saying, there might be some children or other family members in the room, and they might hear this and go, oh God, Dad embarrasses me all the time. But they might pick up that information if it didn't get thrown out the door. So you just never know who you're reaching. And I've just always had faith that we're planting seeds. So we might not see this tree grow, but for all you know, 3 kids with their parent at the table, just being aware of this multicultural group sitting there, or whoever, whatever, encouraging people to open up their heart and mind to a better world, it might affect those children, and they might be going home to a horrible abuse situation, and like, wow, those people gave me hope. So that might encourage them to reach out to somebody. And I know this is about getting out the vote, but I can't get out the vote without also trying to help people have a better life. So it's connected. It's all connected. So just remember, it's a much bigger movement than politics. It's a much bigger movement than just elections. You know, we get involved in this stuff because we care about a better world for people. So I just try not to lose sight of the big picture if the immediate picture sucks in the moment.
All right, Jesse, so what you said to me and Mary Kay is stop at your house before we knock on doors so that we can get a pep talk.
Yeah, I'll give you a pep talk, but I'll slow you down. You don't want me on that. I could be your driver.
Oh, that's dangerous too.
Yeah, that would be
Hey,
dangerous.
Debbie, you got a couple of folks in there making comments too. I'm looking at Linda.
Isaac had his hand up and then Bertha.
Okay, the first person, go ahead. The other
Hi,
person who had their
everyone.
hands up.
My name is Isaac Jabola Corollas, and this is actually my first event that I've jumped in on from the Chester County Community Foundation. So thank you all for doing this, and thank you to Clark from CACS for letting me know about it. I'm a sort of just free agent volunteer, and I'm just interested in doing what I can to help out. I always help out in election years, especially the big ones, but I'm relatively new to the area, so I've been having some great initial conversations around Kennett Square with groups like Kennett Area Community Services and Clark, and with the Garage. So I'm glad to be exposed to now an even wider group of folks who are thinking about this and care about this aspect of the community and community life. And my question is, I've been struggling this election year with, I think, what a lot of people have been struggling with, and that is that the usual messaging about your vote matters. You know, we have a immense, decisive election coming up. That messaging is falling a little flat, and I'm not sure what the messaging is instead of that, especially with young people. I mean, that slide you showed earlier of why young people don't vote. 65%. Of those with college experience and 65% without college experience saying by far that's the biggest reason they don't like the candidates. And obviously we all know in this room that there's an election every year in Pennsylvania. There's not just the presidential election, but in a presidential election year, that's the big one that dominates, and that's what most people think about when they hear it's election time, it's time to get out the vote. So to turn this into a question, I would just ask you all, so, when you get real about how dissatisfied people are with the two choices out there in the presidential race and how turned off they are by the political process after just like 8 years of constant drama and hardship, and not seeing much changing, what are you saying to yourself? What are you saying to prospective voters? And maybe this is a question for, for those of you who are already out there knocking, like Cristian, you're talking to voters every day since you're a candidate, and some of you are also talking to voters. What is the special messaging that we need to be thinking about this year that goes beyond the type of messaging you see in those videos you showed about how important it is? Sorry that question was so long-winded, but these are just, I haven't had a chance to talk to a group of people about this in a little while. It's great that you're doing this, but
Isaac, I love your question, because when people, that 65% who say, I don't like the candidates, that's my sister-in-law, and I just want to whack her across the head and say, I don't care if you don't like the candidates, we're still going to get one. So pick the one you don't like the least then. It doesn't mean voting's wrong, it just means people aren't stepping up as you want. So yeah, what do people say with that? I don't like the candidates, I don't like the issues, because that doesn't matter to me. You still have to vote. Deb, help. What do you say? Bertha,
So,
you got an answer?
No, I don't have an answer, but I was just gonna, Isaac stole my thunder because basically he was saying the same thing that I was thinking, with going back to that one screen where it was showing all the reasons why people don't vote. My question is, how do we change the message or whatever it takes to try to convince the people for whatever their reason to change it? I've been hearing different people, different elected officials talking about, well, the Democrats, let's just say the Democrats, for example, the Democrats need to change their message. The Democrats needs to do this, needs to do that. But what is it? What is the this and the that needs to be changed? And when and how soon are they going to do it? Because this is already May. And, we see the polls, and we all know that polls supposedly, measure how people feel, but they're not necessarily realistic. Basically, bottom line, what is the message that needs to be tailored to these reasons for not voting? What is it that people can say? What is it and say on a consistent basis that could help change somebody's mind? What is that? That's basically my point. No, I don't have the answers.
I'm just gonna say, when I speak to people, whether it's on the doors or it's just in my neighborhood, whatever, and I hear them saying that they don't like either candidate, this is where we were in 2016, those same comments.
Yeah.
And we saw what happens when they decided, you know what, I'm not going to the polls. And again, not a R or a D issue, it was the issues. We were treated, so many things were taken away from us. Our tax brackets went out of control. It was the first time I had to pay a large amount to the IRS. Things changed so drastically because the person that was put in did not care about the issues that were dear to me. So here we are now, back in 2024, same candidates from 2020. That was there in 2016. Do you think it's going to be better if we go the other way with what we saw, what was done for 4 years, and we hear what is being said? I'll say one thing about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is an honest man. What he says he's going to do, he does. So if you didn't think, well, he's saying it, maybe he won't do it in 2016, you saw that he will do it in 2017, 18, 19, and 20. So are we ready to have another 4, possibly 8 years of that? Or I know that a lot of people are not happy with Biden, whatever reason. I'm not happy with every decision, but I know how bad it can get. And I, for one, am not going to sit back and allow 2016 to 2020, 2019 repeat itself. So I think that sometimes you just have to be honest and frank with them. Like, we already saw how bad it can be. The other thing is, they don't just, other than Donald Trump, they don't just become or decide, you know what, I'm leaving graduate school and I'm going to run for president. It's usually a progressional upward step. So you'll have somebody that is currently a US senator that now wants to run for presidency. That's why it's so important that you support these candidates, you vet the candidates, you do your due diligence. I mean, I don't know how many people don't watch TV. I can't imagine that there is no one that doesn't know who the candidates are for president. But it's important that organizations such as this and individuals such as us, we make sure we talk to people, we get information out. You're standing at the bus stop. Hey, you know what Tuesday is? Is election day, primary. The primary is key because the primary is where you're now able to narrow down the candidates. But when people register as an independent, independents aren't allowed to vote in the primary. I disagree with. I think that it should be an open primary to all registrants, but that's just not the way that it is right now. So when a lot of people sat home, what was it, April 23rd? They sat home. They didn't come out to the polls. Yes, there were uncontested races. Okay, fine, but there were some that were contested. You gave away that power. So now what you have is what you allowed to happen. You have to get out to the primary. That's where your candidates are decided. So, I mean, that's just my thought.
I think going back to the gentleman, I'm sorry, I can't see him.
Isaac.
As far as the messaging, you may not like either candidate, but if we revert back to the very first slide, what you were able to do versus what me as a Black woman was able to do, that's message enough for me. If we look at Roe v. Wade, if we look at who may be elected and what else will be reverted back, that's all the messaging I need. So and that's why people like us, you know, the Rainbow Coalition, need allies that don't look like us to vote and get out and understand that, like, when your vote matters, because there's people that can't vote. So when we make it plain, and it may not be something you want to hear, but that's that's my reality. So that's why I do what I do. So I might have to go home, like I'm a single mom of 2, but my kids go with me every time I vote so that they know how important it is, because my grandparents couldn't vote. So it's that simple. I mean, we could say the lesser of the 2 evils, but we see what one person did to appoint as many judges as possible. And these same judges are the ones that, you know, decide the fate of people that look like me. And as we know, there's a lot of people that look like me that are in jail for things that they shouldn't be in jail for, that are on, you know, probation for minor things that people that don't look like me don't get those type of judgments. So we just need to keep that in perspective too. Like when we vote, you know, your privileges aren't the same as my privileges. My ancestors had to fight for mine. So that's something to be mindful of, because as I have a son, you know, and it's scary. It's scary when we think about the things that could potentially happen if we don't vote for certain people to be in office.
Thank you so much, Crystal. I mean, Angel, for sharing that. You know, and as I listen to you talk, one of the things that comes to mind is that voting is like that fork in the road. When you get to that fork, you got to go one way or the other. Okay, so you got to make a decision. That's the bottom line. You have to make a decision.
You have the right to vote.
Pick that one that you want. You know, we didn't finish the presentation, but that's good. Because
that's okay, because you know what, Jimmy, you can't see, but Andrew Esqueda has his hand up.
Yes, sorry, Andrew.
Andrew, go ahead, please. Andrew, I'm sorry, yes.
It's all good. Hey, everyone. This is also my first time hopping on this, which is great, and I appreciate just everything that people have said, etc. One of the things, though, right? Like, I'm a pastor. I think I've got lots of reasons why I think voting is really important, and I serve a church that's very purple, but in a largely progressive denomination. But when I talk to young people, one of the things that I will hear to them, especially that millennial age, which I'm part of, down to Gen Z, is that their inclination to not vote to them is in some way a protest to the fact that look, we got lots of people who are concerned about democracy, etc. But it was also very clear that the DNC had a candidate that nobody else really got to choose, right? Like, and a candidate unwilling to do interviews and to debate other people as well. And so for a lot of young people, they feel this way, and then they talk to older generations, and then they feel gaslit by them by saying, well, you just vote. I mean, Hillary Clinton, who's a huge part of the DNC, just did this to young people the other day. And you've got young people who, the majority of them, think that there needs to be a ceasefire and that we should also stop supporting what's happening in Ukraine. And we have Black and brown folks like myself who are a part of oppressive systems. We see people in marginalized communities, and they're wondering why the people that they voted for aren't doing anything to help them. They're sending billions of dollars overseas when there are plenty of poor Black, brown, and white folks, and across the spectrum of ethnicities and backgrounds and immigrants, et cetera, who are right down the road here in Philly or in Kennett Square, and who are being evicted from their homes and can't afford health care, but billions of dollars can go towards war, right? And they're frustrated that there is, as at the same time, a party, particularly the Democratic Party, that for historically has been anti-war, that now seems to be pro-war, right? And so their inclination towards not voting ends up being a protest versus and I think they want to support that system, but they see a system that actually doesn't care about what their voice says. So how do you respond to people who are kind of in that place? Like, I vote every single year. I do my best to make even the local elections. I think those are incredibly important as well. But when you talk to a lot of young folks, they're questioning these things.
Good question.
Say,
Answers?
But are they
I just wanna
getting
say, like,
involved?
thank you for that. Like, one that really sums up, I think, the young vote really well. Like, we just feel like we have a lot of I mean, I'm saying we, like, I'm speaking generally, but I've like seen it with people my age. I'm 26, so I guess I'm Gen Z, but like kind of a cusp Gen Z millennial, and I think that really sums up like our concerns very well. We're just like, I wouldn't say disenfranchised at all by our own party, but we're just like very confused, I think, where our party is headed, because like historically our party has been anti-war, and now it kind of seems like it's turning into the opposite. And I think that is like a real problem for a lot of voters, especially my age. So I think that's one of the reasons why you're seeing such low turnout in the young vote this year, is that yeah, so I just wanted to say thanks. That really sums it up really well. Like, I think how a lot of young voters are feeling.
Thank you, Paige.
Can I also share?
Well, the thing is, if and you know, thank you for us, Andrew and Paige, for saying what you said, and the fact that all of us are on this particular Zoom call. We are not the ones that need to be convinced. So the question is, who can answer these questions? And by the way, I don't think it's just young people who are wondering these things about, you know, why things are happening the way they are. I've thought about this for years. So, you know, why are things the way they are, and who makes these decisions, and how can we change these decisions? Who has the answers? Who can answer Paige's questions? Who can answer Andrew's questions about why young people are feeling the way they're feeling? We can talk about this round and round and round, but who has those answers? And where do those answers come from? And what are the answers? So, and that goes back to what I was saying before. How do we get around all of these excuses, if you want to call them excuses, but a lot of them are real reasons. If you cannot get off of work to vote, is there something that's in the process now to try to change the voting day to a weekend? I know I've been hearing this for decades, but does anybody know if there's something like that in the process to change the way the United States does things? If you can't get off of work, you can't get off of work, and it's not your fault because you need to work. So where are these answers coming from? And, you know, and so we're going to keep asking the same questions. Who has the answers? Where are these answers coming from? I'm just repeating what everybody else is saying, but at the same time, all of us on this phone call don't need to be convinced. It's the other folks that we're trying to talk to try to help them see, if you want to say see the light, to try to help explain why things are the way they are and how can we change it.
Right.
That's my comments.
Thank you, Bertha. And before Madison, before you go, I just want to give my response to a couple of things that you said. So, Bertha, you were talking about changing the voting day to a Saturday or a weekend. Well, I feel like a compromise that we've had is the mail-in ballots. You apply for the mail-in ballots, then you're able to, you don't have to worry about taking off work. That comes straight to your house, and there's multiple, in Chester County, there's multiple mailing ballots boxes where you can drop them off. The second one was Paige, I appreciate your response, and I get it, I understand. There are local Democratic and Republican parties within each county. It is important that you reach out and get involved and let them, anybody that's registered in either party can attend these meetings. Let them hear your concerns. They're the ones that represents the national DNC party. So that's what you have to do. Get to them and
Go to
relay your
meetings and
questions and
talk.
concerns to them. I'm sorry?
Go to meetings and talk. People need
Correct.
to know the meetings that they can go to. People think they're closed and they're open.
They're open meetings. And when you go to them, we're stronger. I mean, in numbers, we're stronger. So when we go there, instead of, because sometimes I would go to a Democrat meeting and there aren't many blacks and browns in this in Chester County Democrat Party. But encouraging others to try and participate. You don't have to become a member. You are a registered Democrat or a registered Republican, whichever party it is, go to the meetings, voice your concerns. And through them, then they can send the message to the state level and then to the national level. Nothing is going to change if all we do is sit here and it's kind of like preaching to the choir, right? We know what the issues are. We know why people aren't going out to vote. We know how people feel about what's going on in Israel and in Gaza. But if we're just talking amongst ourselves and not giving it to the organizations and the entities that can actually elevate that message, it's all for naught. So yes, the messaging needs to be reconstructed. We need to figure out, how do we convince these younger people or anybody, because it's not just younger people. How do we convince them that, I hear what you're saying, but we still have to make a decision on election day. We cannot afford to stay home and do nothing. That's what needs to be done. We're the change that we're waiting for. We are the ones that have to do it. We have to get involved. Timmy spoke about the barber. If you're not voting, I don't want to hear, you can't talk about politics in my office. And you don't have to be an elected official to be a part of that change. Again, those micros become macros. And if we all do a little bit, then we'll be able to at least begin to move the needle. And that moving of the needle may not be drastic change, but at least the conversation is happening on another level and not just amongst us. I'm sorry, Madison. I said a whole lot. You had your hand up.
No need to apologize. I was just gonna kind of echo what Paige said. Like, as a younger voter, I hear a lot from other people around my age and in our generation that they're just frustrated with the system, that they feel like there's no answer one way or another, and that they feel kind of boxed in by choosing one party or another. And I feel like it's important to remember, it's unfortunate that the system works the way that it is working, or not working, if I could say that. But it's the system that we have. And the only way to change that system is, through getting out there, voting and talking about it and having those conversations and being involved. And, I work full-time grant writing and politics, and depending on how the House and the Senate is controlled really impacts my day-to-day life professionally. So for me, it's, beyond even just the way I feel about other political issues. And so that's been a whole other side of things too, that has really played a big part in the way that I vote. And I think people don't understand that it's the primaries that are really affecting that. So for me, I've noticed just having those open conversations with friends of mine, family members who aren't in that same space has been really eye-opening, so that they understand kind of a more well-rounded or a comprehensive, I guess, perspective of those things and why those are important. And it's not just the presidential election. But I do hear the same thing that, you're saying, Paige, and a lot of others on this call. That's what I hear every day, and it is frustrating. But yeah.
I would also like to add, being kind of an older millennial, I think similarly to how we started this presentation with like the history of voting. I mean, I'm not an old young person. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but basically I grew up and my mom, like, you know, and my dad were always telling me to vote, going out and protesting, like that really mattered. And I never really took it seriously because I didn't see the possibility of losing it until much later. And that's what happened. Freedom, you kind of have to fight for it in every generation, so to speak. We're at a point now where, like, I think, you know, not to discredit young people because they have good intentions, but like they might not realize that there is a possibility of like going, you know, starting where we started, and it's possible to go back to that place where women might not have the right to vote and Black people might not have the right to vote. And, you know, just like the history is important here, the context is important. So I, you know, don't want to bore everyone bringing them back 300 years, but like, you know, even for wars happening right now, there's a history there that a lot of people do not understand. And it's important that this society we live in where you get like 30-second sound bites on the internet is not the full context, and it's viral, and it's, you know, you want to be part of it. And I understand the like positive intention there too. Like you are trying to stand up for what's right. And like, I don't know. I just think it's important for people to get the full picture, and same for voting. I think it's important to understand that these rights that we have right now, where like you say democracy is on the ballot, it's it's clearly needs to be part of the conversation to young people, to all people who might be considering protest voting. There's people who literally died for your right to vote. There's people who literally fought to have this privilege, and there's a lot of ways to show your protest. And voting, you know, is one, but it might not be the best one. You might be better off sharing it in the streets. It might be better off, you know, getting involved in your local government meetings and other places you can go to get your voice heard.
It's more productive rather than negative.
I just want to say, this is Alice. I've been sitting here listening to all this and I agree, but Beth, you hit it on the nail because that's exactly what I wanted to say. People died for the right to vote, and people are still dying for the right to vote. And the only other statement I have is young people also can run for office. And young people are the ones that, if they don't agree with everything, not just learn about their history, but run for office and change it. Because they're the one, they're not our future, they're now. We always say young people are our future. No, they're now. Because I too am 72. So they are now. So young people need to run for offices. And I don't think we let them, you know, say that enough to them, that they should be running for these offices and make these changes that need to be changed. And if it's a 30-second bite, let it be a 30-second bite, whatever. But no, that was my statement. People died. People died. Not just fought, they died for us to be able to vote. And people are still dying. And that's really strong. So I just wanted to say that, but I thank you, Beth.
Well, just to add to what Beth was just saying, talking about there are other ways besides voting to make changes. Does that also include trying to get what is it, civil studies back into the school system? Because I can't think of the actual terms. Civics, thank you, civics. Because we know as some of, and now I'll be 72 next month myself, so I understand what you're saying. But the thing is, we've seen over the years how civics has more or less disappeared. If we're talking about educating the young people, and I'm talking about children, about how important voting is, don't we need to go back to that, you know, at least civics classes? If you don't get it from your parents, at least you can get it in school. So is that something that we as a community need to continue to fight for with our school systems? You know, so I'm just trying to think, you know, how do we have all these questions? How do we answer them? So that's just another little thought that I just had. And thank you very much for Alice Hammond for what you just said, because I was thinking the same thing. Yes, too many people have died and suffered for the right to vote. And something about the United States, we just don't realize how important it is. People across the world are dying and wish they had the right to vote. So, you know, I don't know what it is to help us to understand, you know, maybe it's because we live in the United States and people don't realize what happens in other places, which is another reason why I support exchange educations. Because if you stay in your, a friend of mine has this saying, if you think your mother is the best cook, that's because you don't go anywhere. So if you actually learn and actually get exposed to other cultures and other places, even within the United States, you might learn, oh, well, maybe this is not the best system. And maybe we really should appreciate what we actually have, as bad as we think it is better than what some other places have, which is nothing. So I'm trying to get off my
It's a messy, iterative process over time to improve. I
I'm sorry,
think
say again?
it's a messy, iterative process over time in which we have to engage and push forward in order to make a difference.
Thank you.
You know, one thing that's come out very clear in this, and I appreciate everyone's comment, our thought leaders, thank you so much for your time, your effort, and sharing knowledge, and everyone that joined the conversation. We talked about this being a two-part presentation, and I think that's very clear. So we are going to follow through with our plan, and we're going to plan to invite Deb and Cristian and Angel back again this fall to do a part 2 and continue this conversation about get out the vote, something prior to the election so that we can renew our thoughts. And I'm going to ask everyone in between now and then to really start thinking about all the things we discussed today and ask yourself, what can I do? What can I personally do to make an impact somewhere, somehow, with someone? And we can't fix the whole world, we know that, but every one of us knows someone or someplace where we can make an impact. And I'm going to ask you to earnestly take a look at that and do your best to help impact this so people understand the need to get out to vote. Deb, Cristian, Angel, thank you so much for your comments, for your time, for your sharing with us of your knowledge, your experiences. This means such a great deal to us. And you can see by the response from the folks who participated today, you all did a fantastic job. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Look forward to part 2.
All right. Everyone, thank you so much for dialing in. We appreciate your attention to Community Conversations. And the next session we have coming up, I'll share with you real quickly, is going to be June 11th. And we're going to talk about the truth about Juneteenth. So please dial in for that also. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.